Hello. So my name is Viet. If you don't know how to pronounce my name, it's Viet as in Vietnam. So hopefully that works. This is actually my very first time becoming a speaker, talking in front of a conference or like in meetup of any kind. So I'm excited but a bit nervous. But okay. Today, hopefully you enjoy the presentation. Today I will be talking about Vitest. But before I started, I just want to know who here in the audience have used testing frameworks in their work or like in any project before, by a raise of hand. All right, cool. So decent amount of people. Anyone want to share what they use at their work before or their project? Esther, you want to?
Me?
Yeah.
I didn't even raise my hand.
Okay.
RSpec. What was it? Yeah, everything we did
in Lighthouse Lab, exactly. Yeah. That's
right now we're doing RSpec.
Yeah. Actually, yeah.
Jasmine, I think.
Jasmine? Yeah, for sure. Actually, I also bring some souvenirs for giving it out for people who participate. So, you know.
Thank you.
I have a keychain and a magnet, I think. Do you want? Magnet? Okay, for sure.
Thank you.
For sure. There you go. Let me also give it to you. Do you want a key change or a magnet on the? Yeah, for sure. Awesome. All right. So today I will first talk about the testing, or overall about testing first, before I get into the Vitest, and then I'll give you some example, and then finally we can have some Q&A section. So if I mention about testing, what comes up to mind, like in software? What's testing? Anyone want to kind of guess about what is testing? For sure.
I think it's for like before you write code, it's always a good idea to write a test case. So, and not the other way around, right? So I think that's like a category called test-driven development, where you're guided by pre-written test cases, and that kind of like smooths out the process.
Yes, for sure. Yeah. So there's a methodology called test-driven development, where you write tests first before you implement anything. So do you want some like magnets or keychains, something like that?
We're gonna keychain?
For sure. Maybe
No,
just,
I don't.
you know, sure. Okay. Or we can grab after. You can grab after, you know. All right. So yeah, software testing is just a process of evaluating and verifying that software products or application work as expected. And so why is testing important? What do you guys think? Why is testing important? Yeah.
When you make a change, you might break something and you want to test that if it's whatever you have to do.
Yes, for sure. Yeah, that is really important. You want to grab a? Yeah, for sure. Let me just. Okay, probably just have to put it here. Just pass it. Okay, you can pass. Yeah, back. Yeah. And testing is really important also because, like, if you remember in 2018 or 2019, the two Boeing plane, the 737 MAX 8, it crashed because of the software failure, because it's just pointing the nose down. So testing, with testing, it could prevent some of this failure in software. Also imagine if you are a developer working for Amazon and somehow you mess up the add to cart button on the Amazon website. That will cost them like millions of dollars, right? So with testing, you can avoid certain like failures like that. So here's a slide where I want to introduce a bit about the benefit of testing. So for developers, we will save time, as what he mentioned. If you have testing in your workflow, it enforces you to write better code as well. Because for instance, if your function is too long and you have to write so many different tests for that function, and you might not even have a chance to test somewhere in between of it, then you know, like maybe you should break that long function down into like smaller function and test it individually. Also, it boosts your confidence because you know that the products you wrote when you deliver it to the customer, is performed as expected, or the feature is as expected. For employers, they also save time and money because they can use the developer to develop new features instead of like fixing bugs, prevent emergency call. Either they don't want to wake up in the middle of the night and people asking about like fixing something that's on your website that's not working. And finally, like to increase customer satisfaction, and then as a result to increase their revenue as well. So it's benefit for both developers and employers. As for testing, there's different types of testing. There's unit tests, where it's cheapest and also fastest test to run. In React, you have small components where in React, usually we have a pages, and in the pages there will be a small components. So with unit tests, you can test all those small components first before you bring it into a page. And in the integration test is where you bring all that small components into one page, and then you can test out like how they interact with each other using Jest, Vitest, or like any Chai or Mocast framework. And then at the top, you can use, there will be end-to-end testing you can do, where you can use Cypress to actually render it on the website or like on the browser and test out the interface and some, like, let's say, media query in CSS and all those stuff. Then you can test it in the end-to-end framework, where in the unit and integration tests, you won't be rendering it on a browser, so you won't be able to test certain feature. And yes, today we will talk about the unit test or Vitest. So before I move into Vitest, does anyone have a question? Right. That's good. Cool. So let's go into Vitest. So, if you learn a new framework, which website do you visit first, to get an example? Anyone want to guess? Not Google, but?
The documentation.
That's exactly correct. Yes, yes. Aside from documentation, anyone? Yes?
Issues in GitHub, dev channels.
Dev channels.
The ones that were originally created.
Okay, yes. Very good. Like, actually, that's the website that you should visit very first to know all the like basics and then implementation of that. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, there you go. Let me just pass down some of the souvenir first. Would you want to? Okay.
Surprise me.
Surprise you can have the key. Okay. And then you can pass her down like a magnet for her, I guess. Exactly. Let's play the video, I guess. So I asked ChatGPT about write me a Vitest for this custom hook that I have in my React, right? So let's see what does ChatGPT give me. So I paste in my React component. We'll see. ChatGPT, for sure, I write you one. And then it starts using Jest. So I kind of spotted with the ChatGPT, but also now I know that I have at least an edge over ChatGPT because I know Vitest. So for sure, 6 months later, it has access to the internet, and that's a different story. But for now, I'm better than it. Yeah. So yeah, there's a lot of question between like, should I use Jest or Vitest? Should I use Jest or Vitest? And I do some research on the internet, and it gives me a suggestion that if you're using an older code base and you already have Jest in your code base, then maybe just stick to Jest. Don't switch to Vitest, because right now Vitest has some kind of like a small bugs and performance issue with older code base. But if you are starting a new project using Vite, especially TypeScript, then Vitest is out of the box supported with TypeScript. So definitely should use Vitest for that case. Yes. And here's some general rules for testing. You want to make sure that you make a good names for your test, so that when it fails, you know which test failed, which function failed. you want to write the deterministic test. So that means that it should have a consistent behavior. If you run it 1,000 times, or if you expected it to pass, it should pass. If you expect it to fail, it should fail. You also should write it simple tests. Don't make it too complex, so that people, if it's too complex, then try to break the test down into smaller chunks, into different tests, so it's easier to read. You don't have to cover all of your code base. For NPM package, for smaller package, yes, you can have 100% test coverage, but for like web application or mobile application, maybe just 70 to 80% is good enough. So it depends on your team. And as a junior developer, I guess you should stick to a certain structure to write tests, which is like arrange, act, and assert. So usually you want to pull in the component, then you want to do something with it, let's say grab a text or like grab a button. Then you want to assert, means like you want to verify something or you want to expect something. That is pretty good structure to follow to write a test. And then finally, unit test is not running on browser, so there's no local storage, there's no window method, so you have to mock those if you want to use those in the code. All right, let's get into some example. So here on the left, I have a React component I wrote. Very simple. It just have a favorite text and then a switch or like a toggle that if I toggle true, it will display the text, hello. And if I toggle false, it just hides this text. So let's say I want to test this component. One of the things that I can test is test to see if this component renders the favorite words. And how do I write it? Is I use the AAA method I told you guys. So one is rendering the favorite component. Then I act on it. That means I grab this text. And I expect this text to be in my documentation. Then that is how you write the test. Next. Then if you want to test out the toggle button, then you can write another test to test this function, test this component. You can attach something called test ID to this button so that it's easier for you to grab it. And do the same thing with the AAA. You want to import the favorite components. Then you want to grab the text. You want to try to grab this text. Expect it to be null. That means it shouldn't be in the document initially. Then you can click on the button. You click on this button on line 15 to 16. And then you can expect this text to appear at the end, line 18 and 19. And so aside from those things, you'll be doing a lot of mocking. So for instance, if you want to use local storage in your code, you have to mock local storage. And you have to mock the method like get item, set item, remove item, and clear item. If you want to mock the window properties, then you have to write out the window and then do all this mock of different function. I think we use ndesign in my current project, and then I have to mock this media query thing. Yeah. All right, and then you also can mock like third-party hooks. So in my recent project, I use Apollo for front end, and then back end use GraphQL and Rails. In Apollo, I have to use mutation hook, and this hook will return you a function, and then you can call this function somewhere down on the code, and then pretty much get the response, get the data. So how can you mock the use mutation from Apollo? Is that you can use vit.mock, and then import. Make sure that the import is the same as the use mutation import at the top. And then after that, you just do mock it. So it returns a function in an array. So right, so there's an array. The first element of the array is a function. Then you return a function. And then if you run the function, it will return you a data. That's why there's a data here. Yep. And you also can mock your own custom hooks as well. For instance, this is my React component I wrote. I use all games I wrote this use OGame custom hook, and then it returns this is the data, and then this is a function. I can mock whatever I want. So let's say I want to mock the game so that you can use it later on. Then how I do it is make sure you import the same path as whatever is import here. And then if you export as default, then there will be a default here, and then you can mock all the data within it. Okay, so now I really want to show you about the code coverage. Actually, let me grab, let me grab this. Yeah. So in the code coverage, after you run some code with Viet, Viet will get you this file called coverage, and then you can look into it to see what is the percent of coverage you have for the project, how many lines of code it covers. Also, let's say if you go into one of the folder, you can actually see what line of code that is not running, and then you can decide to either implement the test to test this all this function that you have not tested out, or if you see maybe it's too long and this is very straightforward, then you don't really want to test this, and maybe to implement a feature instead, because testing also takes time. So that's, just display this slide, I guess. Yeah. Yeah, and yeah, as and at the end, I just want to give you some reference, some YouTube channel to inspire you if you want to know more about the test-driven development. Or there's a book, a famous book written by Kent Beck also about test-driven development. It's a methodology that a lot of companies use to write tests first and then implement function after. Yes. And then, yeah, thank you very much for listening to my presentation. And yeah, this is my email, here's my LinkedIn, and that QR code is linked to my LinkedIn. And I would be glad to take any question for sure.
Is that Vitest for Viet, or can it just be used for regular?
Yeah, you can use it for others one as well, but I think there's a lot of people complaining about there's some bugs, and also sometimes it takes a bit longer to execute if you use Create React, Vitest for Create React apps. So yeah.
So if you were to use it for that, our app, it's not work, right?
Yeah, it's better to use. I guess Jest is pretty well known. I guess Vitest is pretty new actually, so they're still fixing a lot. But if anyone started Viet and then do a project in TypeScript, then Vitest is probably the best. Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, for sure.
Or you can come back.
Yeah.
No, go ahead.
Oh, are you, okay. Well, you mentioned how it's good with TypeScript.
Yeah.
What about Vitest?
TypeScript. Yeah. Because Vitest is out of the box supported with TypeScript, so it's. Oh, sorry. Yeah. So she asks, why is it better to use Viet with the with TypeScript? I guess Viet in TypeScript, and it's better because actually for Jest to run, you have to do a bunch of setup, Babel setup, and all this thing, whereas with Viet and TypeScript, Vitest already come with out the box support for TypeScript. So it's very minimal configuration. Yeah, and Viet also it will compile to something called ECMAScript, so it's more of a modern JavaScript standard, I guess. Yeah.
So you mentioned that you need to mock a lot of things like local storage and the window and just anything that doesn't exist outside the browser, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So Viet only is, or Viet
So
So why don't we just use a testing framework that runs in the browser?
yeah, so end-to-end test actually runs on the browser.
But
Like
why don't we
side.
just unit test in the browser as well?
So yeah, so there's different level of testing. So unit test is the lowest, so it's fastest to run, cheapest to run. So that's why we use Jest and Vitest. For end-to-end test, it will be slower and it's more expensive. That's why, but then it has its functionality because certain things you can just test on end-to-end test. It's harder to implement on unit test.
Can you give an example?
Yes. So in my recent project, I write, let's say, the media query in the CSS file. It's harder to implement a test that shrink size of the window and test out all of these different like breakpoints that is inside CSS. Where E2E test can do those stuff, can test out those stuff.
Cool, thank you.
Yeah, sure. You want to grab a key change or a magnet? I don't think I can throw the, but I can throw the. I mean, I can just pass it. Yeah, sure. Yeah. Any other question? Yeah, sure.
So may I know, like, let's say if I want to target like any shadow DOM, right? If you know about extension.js, that creates like shadow DOM, not just like renders symbol DOM. So what if I want to target any components or any like elements from the shadow DOM?
I'm not sure what is the shadow DOM. Shadow DOM. So I cannot answer that question. Maybe I have to look into it because I know the shadow DOM.
Like, I was working on like extension.js.
Yeah.
That's like same as it's like combination of React and Vue.js. So when I was working on it, like it creates like shadow DOM just to like it is as same as like React. So at the time like we used Jest, but I'm not sure like how like Vitest work. Like,
Yeah.
the shadow DOM.
It should work kind of similar to Jest, but the thing is I don't know what is the shadow DOM, so I cannot really answer your question. Sorry about that.
No problem. I check.
Do you want some like keychains? Yeah. Yeah. Can you pass it?
Just
Yeah.
test.
Sure. Yeah, for sure.
I'm just hypothesizing now, right? So shouldn't there be some sort of testing framework where it can detect whether the test requires a browser feature and then it launches like a browser runtime that has those features for that test?
Yeah. So I think what is it, the JS DOM or something? Like they do have certain browser function implemented, but they're not all.
Okay.
But that is But it's just harder to implement in unit tests. Certain tests you want to do it with like the E2E like tests, like using like maybe Cypress or Playwright or something like that. Yeah. Anyone else? Cool. So sorry.
Do you use the TDD in your querying?
TDD? Actually, no. It's just because like for junior is we use kind of half. So we do kind of like doing tests and grabs very basic stuff. But then when we get into harder part, like we have to focus on implement the feature first, and then make sure like, and the feature works out, and then we can go back to our test and do more complicated tests on it. Yeah, because like we as a junior, it's really hard to kind of do the both of them at the same time. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, sorry. 290. Yeah. Awesome. Anyone else? All right. So thank you very much for listening to my presentation. And I will pass it to Riaz to announce like our after party.
And he was being nice to you guys. I actually throw candy at people. And I hit 2 foreheads in my life. Yeah, because if you have like the little wings, anyways, all your forwards just targets to me. So we're gonna hang out here for I guess about another hour or so. If you want to kind of hang out after that, we're gonna go to the Black Hole. So it's a bar about a block away. Another heads up, if after 8 p.m., which is about 10 minutes from now, if you exit the building, you cannot get easily back in. So that you know the front door was open, that is not going to be the case. Just heads up. Other than that, thank you for coming. We will again have an event next month. I forget the venue. We already got that pre-selected. I think we are still. Well, actually, you're going to give a talk next month, right? Okay, so we have a speaker now. Yeah. So yeah, we'll see you again next month. Other than that, thank you for coming and have a great night.
Yeah, thank you. Was that a bit nervous?
Yeah, it's really good to meet you.
Yeah,
Thanks for doing all the heavy lifting and
Yeah, absolutely.
bringing a crib. Yeah, I really appreciate it.
Yeah.